the Sunday that you may have guessed by some of the readings is called Good Shepherd Sunday. It always happens here on the fourth Sunday of Easter. And the theme is always the theme of following Jesus just as the sheep followed the Good Shepherd. And as I was thinking about that theme, a song kept popping into my mind. I have decided to follow Jesus. You guys know that song? I have decided to follow Jesus. And you just keep singing that over and over again. No turning back, no turning back. And I think that, we're probably all here today because whether we would verbalize it that way or not, in some way, whether we've said it or whether it's just sort of something that subtly rides in our lives and our hearts, we have made some kind of decision to follow Jesus, to follow the way of life that Jesus has shown. And so we can identify somewhat with what the folks are asking him as he's in the portico at that feast of the dedication. People of his own religion. We have to remember that there are no Christians and Jews at that point. They're all Jewish people. They're the Jews who have been waiting for a Messiah and who see that Messiah in Jesus and begin to follow the way that he has shown. And then there are others of his brothers and sisters that aren't so sure about that. And it's these that aren't so sure. They haven't decided not to follow Jesus. They aren't so sure. And they say, tell us plainly, are you the one we've been waiting for? Are you the one we are supposed to follow? Are you that good shepherd that the sheep should follow? And Jesus does tell them plainly, but he doesn't tell them the way they want to hear it. Instead of saying, yes, I am, right there at the beginning, though we do kind of hear that later on in that passage where he says, I and the Father are one. But instead he says, I have already told you. I have already told you in everything that I have done that you have seen me done. If you have looked at what I've done, if you've let your feet take you where my feet have gone, if you've seen these works that I have done, then you should already recognize that I am that voice that you are to follow. That voice that just like the shepherds, the good shepherds had a voice, a call, a whistle that called their sheep together. You should know my call, my voice, because you should recognize it by what I have done. So I'm going to tell you plainly, but what I want to tell you plainly, he says, is follow me. The ones who listen to it and recognize it and those works that they've seen, they will follow me. And so that's what he tells them plainly, is you already know. Follow me. And what he meant by that was to look at what he had done and to let their feet take them where his feet had taken him. And if we look back at where Jesus let his feet take him, at the kinds of things he had done, we see several things. We see him letting his feet take him to places where there were hungry people. And he fed them, even if it was out on a hillside in the middle of nowhere. He let his feet take him to places where people felt willing to approach him and ask for healing. And he brought to them the healing that they needed. He let his feet take him to places where there were outcasts, people that had been set aside from everybody else and not allowed to be a part of that community of faith, either because of something that they had done, something that their families had done, or maybe just a disease that they had. And he took people in when he found them there. And part of what it means for us to follow him is to follow him in those ways of feeding those who are hungry, in those ways of participating in the healing of those who need healing, whether it be in mind, body, spirit, relationships, whatever. To participate in that process of bringing those who have been cast out in. But we have to be careful, because it's easy to kind of sentimentalize that. And to, instead of seeing where people are hungry and feeding them with what they really need to be fed with, or in need of healing and just doing what they want us to do, instead of that, Jesus met their true needs, but he did not become what we call today an enabler. And there is a difference between meeting the needs of someone and enabling them to stay stuck, enabling them to stay imprisoned by whatever it is that has imprisoned them. And we see Jesus do that over and over again. We saw him do it with a rich young man who came to him with all sorts of wealth and power and said, I've got all this, but I'm still not happy. And I'm religious, but I'm still not happy. I don't feel the fullness of life that you keep talking about. What do I need to do? And Jesus says to him, before you're going to ever feel that, your riches are standing in your way. That wasn't a comment against people having money. That was a comment that that particular person let his riches stand in his way. He was so attached to keeping his riches and doing and growing them and protecting them that he couldn't see the fullness of life. And so Jesus told that young man the truth. He said, the only way you're going to get to what you need is to get rid of this. So get rid of it, give it to people who need it. And of course the young man couldn't do it. And what did Jesus do with that young man? He let him walk away. Didn't go chasing after him saying, oh, wait a minute, maybe I gave you too much right now. Let's go back and look at this again. He let him walk away. He let him make that choice. Or look how he was with his own disciples. Telling them that if they followed him, it wasn't going to be an easy way. He wasn't a particularly good salesman. I mean, what if we have a visitor and I say, so glad you're here today. Now, if you come here, there's going to be a lot of tough stuff that you're going to have to face and a lot of tough things you're going to have to do, and it's not going to be easy. You'd think I had lost my mind. And yet he was very honest with his disciples that following his way was not always an easy way. He was honest with the people in his hometown when he went back there, and they had heard about him healing all of the folks around in other areas. And he told them, you know, I'm not going to be able to heal a single one of you because you just see me as the boy down the street. I'm going to be able to heal foreigners easier than I can heal you. And they tried to throw him off a cliff. Remember, we read that just a few weeks ago. And he was honest with the Pharisees and the scribes, who led good religious lives, doing all the things that they were supposed to do. The folk that we would say today, well, that's a good church-going man. That's what we would say about the Pharisees and the scribes. And he said to them, you're letting your religion get in the way of the relationship that God wants you to have, even with the people that are outcasts. And then they had a choice. They could listen or they could not listen. And some did. And others figured out a way to crucify him. You see, following Jesus, even when we know what he did and where he went, it's not always easy. Even when we want to, even when we have decided to follow Jesus, it's not always easy to see how to do that in our mixed up world, which is probably not any more mixed up really than his was, just a different mix of things. I had that experience just in the last couple of weeks. Some of you know that I was working with a young couple who 2 Sundays ago showed up at my back door at 5:30 in the afternoon, strolling a little 4-year-old toddler in a stroller. And at first, I get a little freaked out when people knock at my back door, you know, because I'm alone there, and you can't really see much from the back door. So I went to the door. I was a little annoyed, but it was obvious they needed help. I said, go next door. I don't receive people here, and I'll meet you over there. Called Tom to come over and sit so that I wouldn't be here alone with them. Found out that they had no place to go. He said he had been laid off 2 months before. They had run through everything they had saved. They had stayed with their mother as long as they could. She was an invalid and on a subsidy herself, and she would lose her subsidy if they continued to stay with her. And it was Sunday night. There was no way, I had no access to anything to help them. So I said, I can let you stay in the church. So they stayed over in Wanda's room. I brought a couple of pallets over, brought sleeping bags over. I told them they could use the toys with the 4-year-old, just clean up after themselves. I went to the grocery store, bought some groceries, put them in the kitchen, and said that they were willing to take whatever they didn't use. And I tried to get things that they didn't have to cook so that if they ended up staying, if they couldn't stay in the shelter and they had to stay in a motel, they'd still be able to eat the food. So that went and left me a lovely note talking about how much that had meant to them. I had given them some places to check. They apparently were able to get a church that helped them and put them up over at the country Hearth, I think that's the name of it, behind Bob, the restaurant. Called me about Wednesday, and they didn't have food, and they had already used the pantry that month, so you can only do that once a month. So helped them again, got some food, got to know them better, talked with them some, and it just seemed like a nice young couple trying to put things back together. My prayer and praise group prayed for them on that Wednesday. I found out that there were some job applications being taken at USM, and told him about that, and he called in front of me and found out we were to go to the temporary agency in Wilmington to do that. I told him if he needed a ride there, I would take him. Came to find the woman, his wife, said she had been a home health person, had an injury and was on disability, but she could clean houses. If I knew anybody, they would like to earn some money. So I let him clean my house, and he gave me some money, and then they did that twice, and then he came over and did some cleaning and some stuff in the garage for me and stuff like that, and I paid him that, and that was Wednesday. And I had gone over to pick him up because they were having to walk every place, and I would pick her up, and he came that last night. She cleaned the house so he could do some work. The little girl came also. We got in the car, he was all excited. He said, I've got a job. And he said, it's here in town at there's a mattress place next to Walmart, and it starts Monday. And he handed me his little business card. And I was excited about that. I mean, by this time I was feeling like they were my kids, you know. I was excited about that. I said, wow, next week I'll take you out to dinner and we'll celebrate the fact that you've gotten this job. I said, now what about the living thing? And he said, well, we found an apartment. The first one we looked at, we couldn't, you know, it was really horrible, but we found one that we think is livable. We can manage it. We're going to need $700 and something to get into it. And I said, how much do you have? And he said, well, he had painted a house the week before. He said, I have everything but $150. So I'll start this job, I'll work a week, and then I'll earn that $150 and we'll be able to get the apartment. And I said, well, you know, I'm a little nervous about you waiting that long. I'll loan you. I can't give you any more, but I will loan you that to the rest of it, the $150. So just when you see the apartment, call me. I'll go over and meet you over there. I can't give you the money, but I'll write the check to the person and we'll get you in the apartment. But there were these 4 or 5 days in between what were they going to do? So they both came over and worked. I paid them for working at my house. Later that night, they called. They said that the church that was going to pay for them to stay in the hotel a couple of more nights couldn't do it. Could they come back and stay at the church? I said, yes, you can for a couple of nights, but I can't do it for a whole week, so you need to start looking for something else. So that was kind of our arrangement. About 11 o'clock at night, something was bothering me. Some things just didn't fit right. I mean, I'd taken him over to see his mother and stuff, and I knew that a lot of the story was true, but something didn't fit right. Part of what didn't fit right was that he had handed me that business card. And if he wasn't starting work till Monday, he wouldn't have a business card. So I decided to call the mattress company. Of course, it's 11 o'clock at night. And at that point, all I was trying to do was to see what the answering machine said, if it was legitimately a thing or if he had just printed out these cards for himself. That didn't help much. I got like the, you know, how when you get a fax thing. I mean, I got that. So I was going to check again the next morning. Well, the next morning, a woman who owns the mattress company called me and said, you know, had you called here? And I said, yes. And I said, I was just trying to find out if you were legit. I've been helping a young man who says that he has a job there starting Monday. And she said, what's his name? And I told her, and she said, oh, he doesn't have a job here. She said he worked here a while back. And he kept calling for people to pick him up and bring him places. And then he worked about a week, and he just didn't show up. And even the week that he worked, he came in late. And so I said, thank you very much, and hung up. About 15 minutes later, called back. It was her husband. He said, my wife just told me. He said, I think you need to know that, you know, he really did kind of mess with us. And in fact, he still has the jacket that he's supposed to, the work jacket. And I said, well, I'm going to confront him about it. And he said, well, will you ask for my jacket back? And I said, yes, I'll ask for the jacket back. I can't promise that you'll get it back, but I will ask. So I was thinking about, okay, how am I going to deal with this? You know, I called over at the trimmer's house, but Tom was teaching, so I thought, well, I'll call him back later, because when they came over, if I confronted him, I was going to let him stay that night, but I was going to tell him that's it. Well, she called and said, can you come over and get us and bring us over there? And I all of a sudden knew what to do. I mean, I didn't even stop to think. I just said, you know what? You guys lied to me. I said, and I don't do lies. And I said, do you know that your husband doesn't have that job? And she kind of hummed and hawed. And do you know that he did have a job there and didn't honor it and lost it? And she was crying. And I said, you knew this? And she said, not all of it. And I said, well, I don't do lies. And so all of the other things are off. And I wish you the best. And that was it. All the rest of that day, I felt horrible. I didn't feel horrible for telling the truth. I felt sad. I felt betrayed. Perhaps like Jesus did with Judas, Peter. And I worried about it all day, and finally I called a friend, old friend in Knoxville, told the whole story to him. At the end of it, he said, well, you know, because I was feeling like I should have caught it before, too. I was feeling like I should have paid attention to those signs. You know? And he said, you know, he said, Jesus never asks us to have the whole picture. Jesus only asks us to respond to the part of the picture we can see at the time. So he said, you weren't wrong to help him, and you weren't wrong to stop helping him when the picture became clear. And he said, when you put it all together, it may have been the fact that you did both of those things that will plant some seed that might change their lives someday, and you'll never know. And maybe it won't. But he said the thing to remember is that you never are asked to have the whole picture, just to do what you see Jesus would do. I think that when we decide to follow Jesus, that's all we can do. We tend to want to have the whole picture. We tend to want to be right or wrong about whether we're helping or enabling. And I think the only thing that we can do is, based on the information that we have at the time, we respond in the best way we can. And we trust Jesus to work the rest of it out. And if that information changes, then we have to switch to the other thing that Jesus did, which was to tell somebody the truth. But you can't always know that all the time. And the other thing I thought about is that that's not only true when we're working with other people. It's also true when we're working with ourselves. That when we're changing and growing, when we are on our edge, when we're trying to learn more about ourselves and who we are and how we work, we can't always see the whole picture. Sometimes we can only see part of it. But if we can even see part and respond to that part, Jesus does have the whole picture. And in the end, he'll put the pieces together.